Hello, this is the NICU Lived Network, and we are your hosts. I'm Melinda.
I'm Nat.
And I'm Emma. We are all NICU mothers using our lived experience to partner with health professionals to impact research, advocacy, and clinical practice.
Each week we will bring you something new. It could be a topic highlight, the latest in research, or ways in which you can use your lived experience within the NICU to impact change. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome back for 2024. Isn't it fantastic, Nat?
Yes, welcome back.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't have Emma with us today, unfortunately, but we are so grateful to be back again. And I guess just, what became a little side project for us, the way it was embraced last year by the entire community has really been amazing for us. So we're so grateful to be back and looking forward to all the different talks that we're going to have across this year. And to kick us off, we have a really special guest. So we have Alice Rumbold with us. Hi, Alice. How are you?
Hi, everyone. I'm well, thank you.
Yes. Professor Alice Rumbold is a perinatal epidemiologist with over 15 years' experience of leading clinical trials and large I knew I was going to trip over the word, epidemiological studies to improve perinatal and reproductive health. She leads a recently awarded NHMRC Centre of Research Excellence in Human Milk Nutrition for Preterm Infants and is the co-theme leader of the SAHMRI, which is the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, Women and Kids, and is the Principal Investigator of the GIFT trial, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Just fantastic. So Alice, do you want to tell us a little bit more about you and then we can move into the GIFT trial?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk to you all today. So as you mentioned, my name is Alice. I'm a Professor of Perinatal Epidemiology based in Adelaide at the South Australian Health and Medical Research Institute, which is what we call SAHMRI. I co-lead the Women's and Kids research theme of SAHMRI. And one of our major areas of research at SAHMRI is around improving nutrition among babies born early. So this includes finding better ways to support women and families having difficulties breastfeeding their preterm baby, as well as doing research to promote evidence-based use of pasteurised donor human milk. So many of your members may have heard about donor milk. So just a bit of a background, donor milk is breast milk that's donated by another mother that's then heat treated and to kill bacteria and viruses. And donor milk is really the focus of the GIFT trial, which is what I'm wanting to talk to you about today. But I should also just add, in addition to being a researcher, I'm also a mum to a 10 and a 12-year-old. And it's been a big week in our household this week as my 12-year-old has started high school. So all the big feelings that come along with that as well.
Yeah, lots of kids going back to school this week. It's amazing. Can I just, before we start, just in case people don't know what epidemiology is?
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, because it might be for parents, not one of the doctors that they come across in their NICU journey.
Yeah, so epidemiologists aren't medical doctors. It's not a medical degree. Some medical doctors do extra training in epidemiology, but we're researchers. And epidemiology is really the study of patterns of disease and also patterns of exposure at a population level. But many of us epidemiologists have a focus on particular areas of research methodology. So, for example, clinical trials, that's my expertise. But other people, other epidemiologists, and it's sort of come to the fore in COVID, look at study the patterns of transmission of, say, infectious diseases like COVID. So it's really a methodology or a research methodology rather than a clinical skill, if you like.
Yeah. And so with the GIFT trial, where did your interest in that come from, like to be around human milk?
Look, I've always had an interest in focusing on breastfeeding research, particularly some of the difficulties surrounding breastfeeding, because it can be a hard journey for some families. And the GIFT trial really came about following the establishment of the Australian Red Cross Lifeblood Milk Service in 2018, which really has become the first national donor milk service in in Australia. And that service was established based on really good evidence that in those families that don't have enough maternal milk available for preterm infants, for those babies that are born under 32 weeks, using donor milk instead of formula reduces the risk of really serious complications like necrotizing enterocolitis or NEC. So that service was established based on that really good research evidence that, you know, when mother's milk is in short supply, donor milk's the next best option. But there's a lot of certainty about whether donor milk should be given to all babies born preterm. So those born, particularly those born just sort of 4 to 5 weeks early, so between 32 and 36 weeks gestation. And in those babies, we know there are a lot of breastfeeding difficulties, but in that particular group of babies, the risk of NEC is really, really rare. And so there isn't evidence to say whether donor milk should be given to these babies or whether access to donor milk should be expanded, because all of the trials that have been done focusing on donor milk have focused on the really early babies, so those born under 32 weeks. So because we don't have any evidence in babies that are born sort of 32 to 36 weeks, that really led us to the GIFT trial, which is going to give us the answer of whether or not donor milk should be made available to all babies born preterm, or whether it should be continue to be prioritised just for those babies born under 32 weeks.
Okay. And that would be in replace of, so not in replace of mother's milk, it's in replace if the baby requires formula during that stage.
The goal of providing donor milk is always as a bridge to supporting provision of maternal milk, never as a replacement. So it's always because, you know, in babies born 32 to 36 weeks, when mother's milk is in short supply, generally formula is given. So it would be replacing use of formula at the same time continuing to support those mums wanting to breastfeed to build their milk supply.
So other than the incidence of NEC, because I know how serious that definitely is, and like you mentioned, it's not very common for babies born later preterm. Mm-hmm. What are all the other benefits of having breast milk over formula? Like, is that not very clear and that's why you need the study?
Yeah, I think the key thing is donor milk is a really precious resource. It relies on a lot of women to donate milk to a milk bank service, which, you know, then pasteurises milk and freezes it and sends it to NICUs. So while we know that there are lots of benefits of breast milk, donor milk, because it has those sort of processing steps as well, it's never as good as maternal breast milk. And the reason why we need to do a research study around this is because it is that sort of finite, precious resource. If we were to make donor milk available to all babies born preterm, that would require a huge amount of donors, an increase in the number of donors to the current donor milk service. So we just want to be really sure that there are clear benefits associated with donor milk in these babies born sort of moderate to late preterm. But also we want to make sure that we're not inadvertently taking resources away around supporting or ensuring access to really good lactation support for those mums. So it's about, you know, making sure the benefits are clear, but also we're not having any inadvertent sort of negative effects by providing donor milk to this population.
So Alice, just wondering, technically, can families, for example, who've had like a 34-weeker or a 35-weeker and don't have enough milk supply, can they ask or request for access to donor milk, and that will be considered based on the availability, or?
So each hospital has its own individual guidelines, but generally the donor milk is prioritised for those babies born under 32 weeks. There is some clinician discretion around use of donor milk in those sort of later preterm babies, but generally it's not available currently for the babies that are born 32 to 36 weeks.
Yeah, okay. I think the topic really resonates for me because I had twins, and, you know, we unfortunately we weren't able to get access to that just because that system didn't exist here in the Territory. But again, I do meet like parents you know, with later preterm twins, like, you know, 32 weeks to 36 weeks. And a lot of them have the similar stories that they struggled with milk supply, not just for one baby, but for two babies. And, I think a lot of them would have loved to have had access to milk if that was possible, donor milk if possible.
Yeah, and I think there's a huge amount of interest in expanding the current donor milk service. And so many families, I would agree, that are really wanting to access this. It's just that fine balance of making sure that we've got really good evidence to say that that it should be made available, because at the end of the day, it would require a lot more women to donate milk to be able to provide that service as well.
Yeah,
and that's a big, that can be a big ask for women too, donating a lot of milk. So just want to be really clear that the evidence supports use in this population.
So what does the GIFT trial look like? Like, what does it look like? And I'm assuming you're recruiting families to participate, or
Yeah, that's right. So in the last couple of years, we've done a pilot study involving just over 200 babies, which was really, important evidence to take to our funders to say, look, we can do this trial, and families are willing to be involved. And we're now sort of ready to expand this into a much larger trial involving just over 2,000 babies in centres.
Wow, I thought 200 was a lot.
Yeah, well, 200 was our pilot. Now our goal is 2,000. And again, it's just that will provide us with the really definitive evidence about whether policies should be changed around access to donor milk. But in the pilot study, and certainly what we're doing for the big trial, which we're hoping to launch in the next couple of months, is for babies or families that have a baby born between 32 and 36 weeks gestation that are admitted currently to a neonatal unit. If they're ready to start feeding, or they've started feeding, but there isn't quite enough mother's milk available, or in some cases there's no milk available, we go and talk to the families about the GIFT trial and see if they would be interested in contemplating being in a research project, which would mean their baby is either randomly allocated to receive donor milk or standard practice, which in most cases is infant formula. And if those families are interested in participating, we go through a consent and an enrolment process where they join the study, and the donor milk is available for up to 15 days during the neonatal unit admission. But the study also involves following up babies until just over 18 months corrected age, because we're really interested to know whether helping to support feeding, in those very, very early first few weeks of life actually helps with long-term breastfeeding outcomes. So we're measuring breastfeeding at 2, 4 and 6 months, at 12 months and 18 months, and also including a developmental questionnaire at 18 months to look at the sort of longer-term impact of better supporting feeding in those early first few weeks of life.
Right. The larger trial of 2,000 babies, will that be in only certain cities, or will it be in only certain, will everyone be able to potentially participate, or is it?
So it'll only be in participating hospitals. So at the moment, we're about to launch in South Australia at Women's and Children's Hospital, which is where we're co-located, and we're hoping to extend it to the other 2 major maternity hospitals here in South Australia. We're also going to be running the study at one of the hospitals in Brisbane, and potentially 2 in the Hunter region in New South Wales. Because it is a really large trial, up to 2,000 babies, we are going to need a lot of sites. So as we roll out the trial, we will be looking to include other sites. But at the moment, it will be for only available for the families that are having care at those specific sites.
Yeah. And I'm assuming essentially you're looking at those sites that already have or provide a milk donor service.
Yeah, so the sites that are involved so far have all been receiving donor milk from the Lifeblood Milk Service, which is being given to those babies born under 32 weeks.
Yeah. Okay.
What are the primary outcomes that you're looking for, particularly if you're following babies up until 18 months?
Yeah, so our primary outcome is length of neonatal hospital stay. So we think that provision of donor milk will help to make the transition to breastfeeding faster. And so we think it's likely to have an impact on length of stay. And that's our main outcome for this trial. But because we are following these babies up, we know it's really important to keep talking with families and look at long-term impacts. We're looking at breastfeeding outcomes up until 18 months corrected age. We're also doing some assessments of growth at particular time points. And we have a questionnaire on development at 18 months corrected age. The other main area which hasn't really been studied is that we're introducing as part of the main trial is looking at parent wellbeing when the baby leaves hospital. We're trying to get a sense of whether donor milk, because it may improve or reduce the risk of feeding difficulties, whether that has an impact on parent wellbeing as well.
I have such passion around donor milk. So my kind of story and journey with that is in 2012, I was invited to be part of a in Chicago, and it was one of the biggest conferences I've ever been a part of. I think there's about 1,200 delegates from around the world, and it was one of the very first times I had been exposed to a conference around research, because prior to that I was very focused on family. A lot of it was medical, but just sitting there and listening to what I could take in and seeing the comparable difference between, and it was very focused on PREMS, but the difference between, PREMS on formula compared to breast milk, and understanding, what parents go through, what families go through in terms of being able to have milk at that time, particularly when you've gone through a trauma, and there's so many reasons why milk may not be available, and even Nat alluded to, having twins and having to try and have enough milk. But I remember sitting there and leaning back and talking to one of the new professors that I had met, saying, if we know all this, why isn't every baby given breast milk in a NICU? Like, it was just, and he was basically said to me, kind of, you're preaching to the choir. So I remember returning, so this was 2012, and us not having in Australia a national milk bank. Mm-hmm. So when the Lifeblood had come up with the concept of exploring whether they would return to that, because I think there was milk banks available in the 70s, and then unfortunately it got shut down. It was just an absolute yes, how does this happen? So to see that progression where, when it did first get launched, it was very much focused on the earliest babies and around neck and the prevention of something like that. So I think it's just so exciting that we've progressed to this stage now where we are actually having a look at that and seeing it as an option. And I think one of the things that we try and do is help parents, like expose parents to research and saying yes to research. And we were talking about how if you ask for milk at 36 weeks or 34 weeks, it may not be able to be something to be an option, but saying yes to the trial, you've got a randomized controlled trial where you will probably have an option to be able to have access to the milk. So it's just, there's that advantage of saying yes to a trial. I'm wrapping my head around it. It's actually quite amazing for parents to be able to say, this would be something I'd like to be part of, because there may be the opportunity to get access to the milk if that's what they were looking for.
Yeah, and certainly I completely agree with you. So when we did the pilot study, so we had more than 60% of families who we initially approached say yes to join the study. And I think you've hit the nail on the head. Parents were joining the study because they knew this was their only opportunity to be able to access donor milk while their baby was in hospital. So I think, that is a really strong selling point for the study. But I also think it's worth saying, it's not for all parents. Some parents don't like the idea of donor milk, and that's absolutely fine as well. Yeah.
Which would always be an option.
That's right.
Fantastic. Yeah. So what were the results from the pilot study that made you want to do the larger study?
So I think the key thing to be aware of is, because the pilot study was really small, so just over 200 babies, or 201 to be exact, that's not big enough to give us really definitive evidence about clinical impacts. And so we designed the pilot study really just to give us information about feasibility that we could then take to our funders and say, look, we can do this study, parents want it, and they're willing to participate. And we already use that evidence to obtain the bigger funding to do the much larger trial. What we learnt from the pilot study, though, is that what we were initially doing was making the donor milk available for 8 days. And when we looked at the progression of families through the trial and some of the initial findings, we found that a lot of families were still needing, a lot of babies were needing supplementary feeds after that 8-day period. So we've actually changed, for the big trial, we've changed the way we're doing the intervention, in that we're offering it for up to 15 days, because we think that's going to give families and mums the best chance to receive the donor milk, but also at the same time to get the right access to lactation care, to build up the supply and sort of give breastfeeding the best chance that it can be while they're still in hospital. So the results of the study, as I said, we don't have sort of clinical results that we can share just yet, but it certainly gave us a huge amount of evidence around feasibility and helped us to demonstrate that this was a study that parents wanted to participate in, which is often the sort of one of the hardest things to demonstrate to funders, that this is something that parents will do. And I think particularly because we recruited families, it tended to be when their baby was on the second day or day after their baby was born, which is, really potentially really stressful time and intense time for families. Sometimes we would approach the families before, if there was, if a preterm birth was anticipated, we would give them information beforehand. But generally we were approaching families the day their baby was born or the day after. And it was important for us to demonstrate to our funders too that we could do that, and that families, even though that's a really stressful, intense time, that they were still willing to participate in the study and join it at that point.
Yeah.
And how long will the study go for?
So 2,000 babies is a lot. Our funding goes for 5 years. We're really hoping that the recruitment part of the study won't take that long. And that's why we're sort of looking at trying to include as many sites as possible. But it is currently a 5-year study. And as I said, we need that 5 years to get the 2,000 babies, to do the analysis and the follow-up, get that really clear evidence about the impacts of donor milk in these moderate and late preterm babies. And that information will be used by Red Cross, by government, to then decide whether or not funding should be provided for expanding access to donor milk or not. And babies that are born 32 to 36 weeks, they actually make up the vast majority of babies that are born early, I think about 85%. And so if you think, and not all families will have difficulties with breastfeeding or milk supply, but we know that a lot of families do. So if donor milk is getting made available to babies born just a few weeks early, that would be a significant expansion of the current service.
You mentioned, that the evidence would be presented to the funders later on. And initially I thought it was going to be just mainly like, the data was like, numbers and figures, etc., and stats. But then you also referenced earlier that there would be a survey given to parents as part of that later developmental assessment. Will that mean that potentially there's room for parent stories to be captured in as part of the evidence?
Yeah, absolutely. There is room for parent stories, and we would welcome that. We'll also be doing a health economic analysis as part of the trial, which is increasingly being asked for sort of most big trials, that you've got to, present an economic analysis of benefits. But in terms of the parent stories, we absolutely want to capture that. And that sort of leads into another point which I wanted to raise, is that we're really interested in having families, if they are willing to join our sort of advisory group for the GIFT trial. And what we're seeking is feedback, and it would involve participating in several meetings a year, but really giving feedback about the way we're doing the study, ensuring that we have a parent voice in the implementation of the study, but also as part of a bigger group of helping us to determine what the next priorities are around breastfeeding research, around use of donor milk, so that we can have that very early inclusion of parent voice in helping us determine what are the key priorities around breastfeeding research for parents of preterm infants. So if there are any parents that are interested in joining our advisory group, we'd be, really welcome your involvement and potentially use that advisory group, but also our parent surveys to capture parent voices that we could share in terms of building the evidence around donor milk.
That's wonderful. And would you mainly be looking at all parents that have had that donor milk experience or not, or within any kind of who had babies at any early gestation, or do you want families only between that 32, 36?
I think having the parent voice of those families that have already been able to access donor milk is really important. So we would ideally include families who've had of a baby that's born at any gestation that's preterm. We would also be keen to hear from parents who specifically have a baby born 32 to 36 weeks to get their opinions as well. So ideally it's having a mix of experiences in our advisory group.
That's wonderful.
Okay. How many parents would you be looking for the advisory group?
Look, we know parents are busy and family lives can be incredibly busy. We'd welcome any sort of involvement really, but it would be great to have 3 to 5 parents that are willing, and we offer some reimbursements of their time, because we know that can be everyone's lives are busy, particularly when you've got young families. But if more families wanted to join, we would welcome that as well. We would not going to be exclusive here.
Oh, that's amazing. So you've got parents that can actually join the trial while their baby's in the NICU, and then parents that can come back and offer their experience and their voice to the actual advisory group. That's wonderful. I mean, that's everything that we look for in trials, of able to integrate parent voice. So that's fantastic. And all that information on how people can do that, we'll make that available in the notes and some slides up as well.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about it too. We'd also welcome parents who've donated milk to the milk service, because that provides another experience and another element as well. So,
It would be fantastic if you had one parent that had a baby who received donor milk. So because it's only available to the early preterms, it would probably be in that cohort. Another parent in the 32 to 36 that may have wanted access or what their thoughts might be, and then a parent that donated, a mum that donated. I think that's what we do as our little ask. That would be amazing if you fall into one of these degrees. Do you want to join and be part of the advisory group for the gift trial? I think that's amazing.
When you eventually do roll out that bigger gift trial, and then when it's finished at the end of the 5 years, how will parents who participated kind of get updated about what happened or what their contribution led to?
Really a good point. What we tend to do is write to all of our families who have been involved in the study and tell them what the results of the study are, and if they want to know what group they're in, whether it's the donor milk or the formula group, because families don't know what group they're in when they join the study. We provide that information to them as well. But we also have developing a website that is featuring our research related to breastfeeding in preterm babies and also donor milk, where we will put updates about the results of the study in the website. We are getting better at using social media to promote our results as well.
Here you are.
and then the usual kind of conference presentations as well, which obviously we know families may not necessarily access or go to, but we would tend to share as much as we can around social media the results of the study. But we're really dedicated to ensuring those families that did actually participate and gave us their time and their energy and effort to join the study and fill out our questionnaires, get the results specifically sent to them so that they know what the outcome of the study was.
It'd be lovely to potentially feature you in 5 years' time, or when the trial finished, to get an update and say, this is, since we last spoke, this is what's happened and this is the outcome. Just, it's fascinating to hear how it went.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to do that.
Yeah.
And anything that you want us to share along the way, just send it our way, and we'll definitely share it on our socials and with our audience, which is pretty cool.
It's such an important study.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Is there anything else you want to share with us before we go?
No, just as I said, just welcome any family input. I think we can always improve and continue to improve the way that we engage families in our research projects. And just to acknowledge that our research doesn't happen without families. So we can't do this without the involvement of families. So we're really incredibly grateful for the effort and the commitment that families put in at what is, potentially a really stressful time. So just want to acknowledge that as well.
Yeah,
that's beautiful.
Absolutely. So Alice, thank you so much. I think, like I said, passion of mine to be able to have every baby in the NICU, if there's benefit, that they'd have access to breast milk. So it's such an important study, the GIFT trial, to be able to give those babies the opportunity to have access, and then to also look at, definitively what are the benefits, so that we can keep pushing forward to make it available for all babies. But thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap on another episode of the NICU Live Network. Thanks for joining us today. To stay connected, please make sure you're following us on social media.
And if you found value in this episode, please share, like, or comment.
We'll see you on the next episode.